Welcome. My name is Grzesiak, and in this Blender Ignite video, I'm going to be showing you how to use the spawn generation script. Now, before we continue, what is a spawn point? Well, a spawn point is what the computer uses to determine where it's going to bring the object that you want into the scene. You can see in this checkerboard pattern, there are three hat-like structures where the object will spawn in. And so what's it going to bring in? It's going to bring in an object from another layer. When it deletes it from the game, it means that you are no longer able to access it within the game. And this means that you need to have it on another layer so that the object is still there, but not active within the current scene. That means we can use these points here to bring in the object and to have it appear in any way that you see fit. And so I've developed a bit of a script, and it's going to determine how to use these spawn points in a few different ways. So let's go and see how this works. So if I click up here on the spawn generator, you can see the name here, spawn generator. Yeah, I thought it sounded kind of cool, generation, but generate is the same thing as spawn. It's kind of redundant, so I don't know, but it sounds kind of cool. You can change that, and you're probably going to have to if you have different setups of these. But anyhow, in this setup, I have the spawn generator, and you can see that it's set up with a script. You can see in the left-hand column with the game properties, you can see that there's about 5 properties set up with some different modes. I'm going to jump into this game and show you how it's done. Now, for mode 1, which is, if you come down here, spawn mode string random. Now, you may be thinking it randomizes these spawn points, and you are right. When we push play in the game, you can see that the cone appears in one of these 3 squares. So when this object ends, I'm sending a message back to the generator, and it's telling it to spawn at different locations. And this will randomize it in as many ways as it can, using a different number. So you can see that with spawn mode random, it takes these spawn points and randomizes it. So let's just make this example a little bit bigger. So you can see here that each of these points down here is named cone.000, and this one's cone.001. This means that each of these cones is incremented by 1, which means that when I come in and duplicate this, you can see that it's now cone 3. So I'm going to just really quickly take these 3 cones, I'm going to duplicate them and just move them down here to these squares. You can see that we now have cone 3, cone 4, and cone 5, and so you can use as many spawn points using this spawn mode. So I'm going to just show you that really quick. So now you can see that it's randomizing through every one of these spawn points, and it was really easy to set up. So that's basically how you do it, and you put these points anywhere you want, and this spawn generation finds these points using the name. So cone is the name of the object that we're bringing in. And you might say, what use is the numbers? Well, the numbers are useful for when we go in and we set up the next mode. So what is the next mode? Well, if we come under here to the directions, you can see that the spawn mode string, so we have 3 here. We have random, sorted, and nearest. And this one is useful, say, if we're going to do sort of like a mission-based game. And this means that your character is traveling and does one thing within the map, and it's finished, and you move on to another section of the map. So you're still within the same map, but what you don't want is your player restarting all the way back to the beginning. So this sorted mode allows you to travel up the spawn points. And that is a very, very neat feature because it allows you to specify where you're going to then respond from. Okay, so I'm just going to show you that in action here. And what I've done is on this plane I set up You can see here under the left shift, I've come under here and put checkpoint, which is what the spawn script uses to determine when it's reached a certain point, and you can see that the name is tapped onto the end. When your object completes something, it just sends one of these messages, and it will just increment it and tell you you're now on the next stage. So I'm going to show you here. I'm going to push play, and I'm going to push spacebar. It deletes back to it. So say I want to then respond here. So when I complete the objective, I shift it, which means I incremented it, and now I only appear on this square. So I can go through and just appear on these different ones. That is very cool, and you should be able to use that to document or keep track of where your player is throughout the game as it's moving through your scene and responding to the different spawn points. All right, so that is very cool, and you can see that under sorted loop, you can see that with this option sorted, that you can have it just loop through those again, starting from the beginning if you do want to, and you can just check that or create that property if it's not there to begin with. The next option we have is nearest. So this option is pretty cool because what it does is it takes an object determined by this bottom property, nearest object. So I can set this up, say to this cone. So this pink one is called cube 2. You can see there. So I'm going to just click on here and go cube 2. And it will now spawn to the spawn point that's closest, which in this case is to that cube. So now when I push play, you'll see that it doesn't spawn there. But what happens is every time you spawn after that, it will now spawn closest to that object. And that is so that it'll spawn to the very first spawn point determined by this number, and then forever after it will spawn closest to whatever you have. The other really neat feature is that with the nearest object, you can actually use it to track moving objects. Because the distance is calculated, you can use it to track enemies, which means that you can spawn next to them. Say if you're in a huge map that spans the universe, you can spawn right next to them and not have to worry about getting lost in the map and never finding each other. In this way, I'm going to just put in the name of the object, because you can also put in yourself or the player that's being spawned into it, and wherever that player goes next to, it will spawn to the closest one. So I'm just going to push play. You can see the cone there, and I'm just going to move over here, and you can now see that I'm moving here and then spawning. When I delete the object, it's spawning in the square or to the nearest checkpoint. You can even use this to track your player through the scene as you're going along, and wherever you're near, you can then spawn there. So that's pretty much it for the spawn point script. Now there is one more feature that I skipped over, and you might be wondering what that is. Spawn number. This option pretty much doesn't do anything to the script. You can change that all you want, but it won't do anything. So you might be wondering, why would you have added it? Well, I do know that in my experience, when I've used this in the health script, when you have a health property, whenever the health changes, you can actually use that property and send the number somewhere else in the game. So I thought it would be useful if you want to keep track of how many deaths your player has had throughout the game, or how many respawns it's had, or if you want it to do something after 3 respawns, or if you want it to change the mode. You can do whatever you want. So this spawn number, I'm going to show you right now. Now I've turned on debug properties under here. It's a little hard to see, but I'm just going to pull this out so you can see that it says debug properties, and that means that when I enable this spawn number, you'll be able to see it up at the top left corner. So let's play this. You can see that I'm going to just turn this to random, and when I push play, you'll see that it goes spawn number 1, and every time I spawn, it adds 1 to that number. And so if your game counts of 32 deaths, you can then record that and put it into a temporary file. So this is the spawn script. I'm hoping you're looking out for ways to use it in your game. And in this next section, I'm just going to show you how to set that up so you can use it in your game. Alright guys, I've opened up a blank new scene. You can see that the checkerboard is here with those 2 cubes, but nothing else is in this scene. I'm going to now show you how to set up the spawn point script. Now there are 2 methods before we continue. You can download the script and follow the instructions on that and start it from scratch, or you can import by appending the spawn point setup from the Blender file. And I would recommend doing the append method because it gets you very quickly off the ground, whereas the other one will take a bit of time to set up those objects. So I'm going to show you the method of the append, and if you want, you can follow the script method on your own. So I'm going to come under here, under File and Append, and I'm going to just click on the spawn point.blend. Now this is the Blender file that you will download from Blender Ignite, and you'll be able to see the download link in the description below this video. We just open up the spawn point and we go under Group and Spawn Point Group, Link and Append. You can see that it looks exactly like the setup before, but it is set up with this cone. So I'm going to take this cone and just move that to layer 2. And if we just come under here, we have all the game properties, but there is no script. So let's bring that in right now. So we can go under Text, Open Text Block, and go under Scripts and Spawn Point. We'll just pull that in, see all the directions, the setup, and so we are good to go. So I'm just gonna come in here and just go play, and you can see that it is randomizing the cone. But how do you do that for your object? So we come to layer 2 and we have the cone. I'm just going to select solid mode here, and I'm going to show you how to set up using your method. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to add a cube, and I'm just going to move that to the side. And for this cube, because I want to show you something special with the checkpoint, I'm going to come under the settings here and go under static. I'm going to name it dynamic, and under the material, I'm going to add a new one called cube. And you're going to see why that is the case in a little bit. So I'm going to jump back to layer 1. I'm going to go into textured view. We need to click on the spawn points, one of the spawn points, and just rename it. So I'm going to go N for properties, come under the cone and name it cube. And that will help the program to determine what it's bringing in. So I'm just going to take these other 2 points, delete them, and with this first one selected, I'm going to just put Shift D, move it over, Shift D, move it over again, and just duplicate those 3 spawn points. Close the properties panel, and you can see that they've all incremented by 1. So I can come into the spawn generator, and instead of the spawn object, I'm going to just name this cube. Okay, so I'm going to just push play. You can see that the cube comes up in the corner, and you can see that working. However, the next step you're going to need to take is to set up how that object is going to die. And so whatever method you use, you can set that up. I'm going to just show you using the space bar. So I'm going to just come back to this object and add a sensor. I'm going to just call this a keyboard, and I'm going to go under Edit Object, End the Object, and I'm just going to send a message to that spawn generator. I'm just going to give it a subject called spawn underscore cube, which is the name of this object. And I'm just going to select and connect these to an AND controller, and we are good to go. So I'm going to just open up this scene in layer 1, and I'm just going to cycle through that. And so that is working for the cube. So pretty much all the other modes are working. The only one that is going to need a little bit more tweaking is the sorted mode. So I'm going to come under sorted, and that mode will mean that we need to set up checkpoints. And so I'm going to show you how you would set up a checkpoint in your game. I'm going to come over here and add a plane. I'm going to rotate around the x-axis by 90, scale this up here, and I'm going to come under the add sensors. I'm just going to zoom in here a bit. So under here, I'm going to add collision. I'm going to give it a material called cube, and I'm going to add an actuator called message. I'm going to send it to the spawn generator again, and for the subject, it could be anything. In this case, we're going to call it checkpoint underscore cube. And I'm also going to end the object so that it doesn't affect or send any more messages that we are worried about. Now, this would be invisible in the game, but for the time being, I'm just going to show you how this works. I'm just going to duplicate it, move it over. Just going to move it over because they disappear at a different angle. So now I'm just going to move over to the cube, and right here, we're just going to add another keyboard sensor. This one's going to be just W, and I'm just going to just move it, give it a bit of motion on the y-axis. So down here under the location, under Y, just give it a -0.1, and this green arrow is the y-axis, and I'm just going to move backwards on it. Alright, I'm going to just push play, just going to move the cube, and you can see that disappear, and now it will appear at the second spawn point, and I'm going to just go past the next checkpoint and now appear only in the third checkpoint. So that is how you set it up. It's pretty easy, very easy if you append it. All you need to know is that the name, you need to set up the name called cube or whatever object is your name, and you then need to give it a name here and put the object in layer 2. My name is Grzesiak. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it and can use it in your game, and I'll see you next time.